Hi, I'm Pat McGrew. I'm the Managing Director for McGrewGroup. And this morning, we're going to talk about Workflow Evolved, workflow strategies that you can use today and hopefully tomorrow as well. And for those of you who've been around the Solomar user group for the last few years, we've been having this workflow discussion for a while. This is the natural continuation because workflow has to evolve. And if you have not done a good assessment of the workflow tools that are available to you today and the ones that are in use today in your shop, this is going to be a great time to be taking the time to do that. So why should your workflow evolve? Well, it should evolve because everything about your business keeps on changing. Right? Your workloads are changing. Maybe you've taken on a lot of work from partners who have maybe closed their implants. Maybe you've taken on work from other organizations that have had to close their doors for various reasons. Maybe your customers are just printing a whole lot more and communicating a whole lot more because there is so much more to say. Insurance organizations, financial service providers, regulators of all sorts are communicating a lot. And so you may find that your business is kind of overwhelming in some ways, while others of you may find that your business is, maybe on a bit of a roller coaster. No matter, your workflow should be able to expand and contract to do that no matter what. And if yours can't, this is a great time to be thinking about what it takes to get there. Because as your workflow is evolving, your business is evolving. And you need to be considering what your product mixes are. You need to start thinking about the customers that you're serving and maybe other things that you can do for those customers that you haven't offered them yet. You may need to add some new products or want to add some new products in that allows you to gather more of their wallet share. And remember that over time, your equipment is changing too. You may have added additional presses. You may have changed vendors. You may have changed technologies from toner to inkjet, or maybe you're living in a hybrid world where you have some of everything. And maybe your staff has changed too. I know a lot of companies are experiencing that right now. So your workflow has got to evolve. And by the way, this isn't just your production workflow. It's your business workflow that has to evolve as well. So let's talk about all of these things for a minute. So if we talk about workflow, can your workflow help save you money? If you evolve your workflow, will it save you money? Well, the answer is yes. All of the things that you do to optimize your software infrastructure, your hardware infrastructure, and your business infrastructure put money back into your pocket. We talk about an average production workflow as leaking money onto the production floor. It does it every time someone has to touch a job. It leaks money every time it has to go through a loop. Every time you have to call a customer to ask a question about a file that they sent. Every time somebody has to bit twiddle with a file because it came in missing things or with weird fonts. Every time you have to touch a file, it is costing you money, and it's money you may not be charging. It's money you may not be charging because you may be on a contract basis with your customer on the assumption that what they're sending you is the right thing, and it may not be. So what we want to do is optimize the software infrastructure so that it can handle a lot of the weird stuff that comes in as automated a way as possible. We want to optimize how the files come in and how they're onboarded. And that actually speaks back to the sales process and the promises and the guarantees that are made between your company and your clients in terms of what you can accept and what you will do for free if a file comes in not great shape versus what you might charge for. We want to optimize the productivity because that's where the money is. Every person you pay is money. All the money you pay to the vendors for the software and the hardware, it's money. So we've got to optimize that whole production environment from onboarding to delivery in order to make sure that you're getting the best margins you can get. And that also means optimizing the services that you provide. So if you're doing merging for your customer, template merging, if you do template design, how often are you looking at how much you're charging for that? How often are you assessing how much work it really is to do what the customers are asking you to do? Because you may have set your rates based on older ideas of what it was going to take, and actually older capabilities of your solutions and services. Because this is all about optimizing your business at the end of the day. And so how we get there is we assess. So what we want to do is walk through some quick views of how to assess your business today, and hopefully in the next few weeks, how, assessing your business so that you can get ready for next, and you can make sure that your workflow will evolve to take on not only the work that you have and to maximize your capacity, but to ensure that you're positioned for the future, because evolution is constant. If you do it right, you're always ready for whatever is next. And that's where we want to be. So where should you start? Well, it's a good idea to understand the markets you're serving. And the markets that many of you serve are changing. For those of you who serve insurance and financial services, we're watching those markets undergo a revolution right now. An awful lot of the banks have started enforcing, talking to their own clients via apps, whether their customers like it or not. Insurance companies are relying more and more on apps. I think many of you have the ability to interface with them and you push data to them. But paper doesn't go away entirely, and you need to understand where paper plays in those regulated communications. For those of you who are in the charitable donation business, solicitation business, you already know the power of paper. You know that emails are fine, but that three-prong approach where you email, you postal mail, and maybe you follow up with a phone call or another mail or another email, this three-prong approach is really, really valuable. And you want to understand where all of these things will play, and your workflow needs to be in tune with all the things that you're offering. If you're offering multi-channel delivery, you need to make sure that every touch point in your workflow is capable of feeding into that multi-channel workflow. You shouldn't need multiple workflows. You should need a workflow that has multiple pipes. You need to look at your customers. I used to work for a gentleman who very often would stand up in a meeting and say, it's time to start looking at who we have to fire. And he didn't mean us, he meant the customers. He wanted us to be very focused on the customers that were the right fit for the business we were in, and not to be grabbing for just any old customer just to have a customer on the books. It's a good idea to take a look at your customers and see, relative to the amount of money those customers bring in, how much are you spending to support that customer? You might want to adjust who deals with the customers based on that. And in some cases, you might want to fire a customer. You do that by reviewing your accounts and really understanding your margins and really understanding your cost of goods sold. So many times when I've done assessments, when we really take a hard look at where a customer is and how much the contracts are for and how much work is being done and the cost of producing the work for them, we find that the assumed margins are not the margins that are actually attained after the job comes in and is put through the process. There are organizations who have jobs that regularly come in and need hand-holding. It arrives at 6 p.m. every night, and for the next hour, somebody has to play with it in order to get it in production. And that time isn't accounted for anywhere. It's not charged for. And then there are the jobs that come in that are halfway through production, and then the customer wants to change something, and you actually have to print it all over again. And in many organizations, while there is a line item on the contract that says you can charge for it, it never actually gets charged for. So those are the things you have to start to take a look at. What businesses are you in? How are you selling them? What are your real costs? What do you really know about what it's costing you? And remember, I said that one of the things you want to do is look at the markets. And when you look at the markets right now that we typically play in, direct mail, according to ANA, which is the former Direct Marketing Association, it's a $44 billion industry. A lot of opportunity in direct marketing, and it's growing because all the generations like direct mail marketing. That's what all the data tells us. We know that commercial print is anywhere from a $400 to $800 billion industry, depends who you talk to and what they're including. but there are huge numbers of opportunities, or huge amounts of opportunities in commercial print. And in fact, some of what you do may be commercial print. And maybe you have opportunities to offer additional products based on the equipment that you have. Transaction print, it's the smallest one, it's $10, $12 billion industry worldwide, but that's probably not going to get smaller. No matter how much we try to force people into apps and online and into email and onto websites, the reality is that 2/3 of engagements of regulated communication still have an opportunity or a desire to be done on paper by an awful lot of people. So we want to think about how we're offering those products in a way that makes a lot of sense. We know that basically, printing industry, like a lot of industries, we're sort of in decline, but that doesn't mean there's not opportunity. There is tremendous opportunity. And when you leave in that multi-channel, omni-channel communication, pushing to apps as well as to email and to websites, tremendous amount of opportunity for you, but your workflow has to be there to support it and not shut it down. So I want you to think about something. I know not a lot of you do catalogs, right? And it always amazes me because it's something that is so in your wheelhouse. Catalogs are the comfort food of the marketing industry. It's really funny, it's why we all get them at holiday time, right? We all get the mailboxes full of and then we don't see them again for the rest of the year. That's starting to change. And maybe you've noticed in your mailbox that more and more catalogs are coming out. Now they're smaller, right? It's not the old Sears and Roebuck, Montgomery Ward giant catalog, or even the Uline catalog that many of us get. They're smaller. They're maybe 16, 32 pages. But there's more and more personalization and mass customization in them. There's more and more targeting in them, even if they aren't actually personalized. That's right in your wheelhouse. It's data-driven communication. It's just a question of being able to print and finish. And an awful lot of this can be staple bound, which many of you can do. So think about, different catalog formats. You may have customers who might have things that they might want to offer via a catalog. It's a conversation worth having because these volumes are only growing. So how do you get there? We like actionable things. You're going to review everything that you're doing. Review your customers, evaluate your profit by customer, figure out which customers you may need to rethink how you support them. And then you want to take that hard look at your operational costs and figure out if you're offering products you shouldn't be because you're not making any money on them. And if you got a loss leader, I get it. Loss leaders are loss leaders, but that does not mean you should be losing money on all your products. Loss leader should be a singular, not a plural. And if the customers who are taking advantage of those loss leaders are not also buying other products from you, you should not be offering them loss leaders, right? The whole idea is to get business, not lose business. So calculate what you're really doing. It's an exercise, and it can be a painful exercise. And it's always fair game to, hire help to help you identify where all the costs are. It's an excellent exercise to go through because it can help you focus on how to bring margins back into your business, how to increase the margins in your business, and make sure you understand what channels you're supporting. Right? Some of you are print only. Some of you are heavier on multi-channel and light on print. Some of you are multi-channel only. Whoever you are serving, make sure you understand those channels and make sure you understand if you are supporting those channels in the best possible way. Right? It shouldn't require multiple touch points to get all these channels served. You may not be using your tools in the best way. You may not be as automated as you could be. You could be saving yourself time and money. So this is why we do assessments. One of the things I like to do is use this rubric that kind of walks through how to look at a business and the products that they serve. So this one is sort of filled out, but if you erase what's in the right column there, think about, who do you work for? Who are your primary customers? What's their biggest problem? What's the thing that when you have conversations with them, what's the thing they can't solve? Do they look at you as a partner that can solve those problems? What do you provide that'll solve those problems? And what's your value proposition to them, right? Is it that you're cheaper than everybody else? If that's the case, that's not great. Is it that you have the ability to handle multiple channel output for them? That you've got a great design service that you can offer them? What is it about you as a company that is the best thing? And how does that feed into ensuring that your total cost of operation, total cost of print, and your margins are in alignment? What is it that only you can give this customer? Because that's what keeps them your customer, well, for life, right? Take a look at your workflow. We like to think about people, processes, and technology, right? It's a common rubric to use when we're talking about workflows. How many people touch your jobs? I've asked this question every year, and it's funny, even after I ask it every year, I end up doing assessments in places where I find that someone says, oh, well, only one person touches here, here, and here, and I go in and I discover that it's actually 5 people because things loop and they go in and out. And so maybe there's one defined touch point, but it may be a lot more people. Think about how many homegrown processes and freeware pieces are stuffed in. See if you're paying for multiple pieces of software that do the exact same thing. And it's not uncommon in our industry to do that because different customers might be on different pieces of software and you're trying to match them, and I get it. But you need to make sure that you understand why you have the pieces of software you have and figure out if you can deprecate some. You might be able to deinstall because, customers may have moved on and you're still paying maintenance on something from 10 years ago. Can you replace anything that isn't really working for you? Are you using all the software you have to the best of its capability? Sadly, the answer for most of you is going to be no. Because you're going to discover that a lot of the software that you have that has great capabilities isn't really being used to its full extent, either because of a training mismatch, or because people have changed and they don't understand all the capabilities, or because when the software was installed, it was get it installed, get it working, not get it installed, get it working, and then let's use it to automate and become more efficient. And that's where you really want to be. So walk your workflow, figure out where your touch points are. So this is an evolving graphic. Every time I use it, it tends to grow. Eventually, I'm going to need 2 slides. This starts at job onboarding and ends at logistics, but in fact, for many of you, the process, there's a creative development piece in there as well. If you look at all these touch points, every one of these is a list of things that has to happen and people doing them. And if you look at things like pre-flighting, it might happen, multiple places in a workflow. Is your pre-flighting being done in the best place? Is it being done at all? Do you know for sure that each one of these pieces is being handled as efficiently as possible? If you walk your workflow, you may be amazed to discover how many people are touching things, even in the most automated workflows. And the reason we harp on automation is because automation lets you take people out of the process, which saves you money, and use those people for more value-added activities. It also normalizes the workflow process and takes the risk out of it. At the end of the day, think of workflow as risk mitigation and automated workflow as risk management, because that's what it really is. Because in most cases, workflows are masterfully messy. And when they're messy, they're costly. And we don't want them to be costly. So here's what I want you to do. I want you to go back to your shop, sit down with your production team, and take a hard look at all of these potential evolution stoppers. Because you're going to find one or more of these going on in your shop. You're going to find that you don't really know what you've invested in workflow software, or you've invested in a lot of pieces and you're not maybe using all of them, or you've invested in pieces with the best of intent but never implemented. It's a good time to identify those things and get that solved, mitigate that. Do you really know what your software costs are? Sometimes companies decide not to invest in a new feature that's available from a vendor because they think their costs are already too high. But in fact, if that feature will save time and might even eliminate a full-time employee on the payroll or in the production payroll anyway, there may be a reason to look at that feature. You might be paying maintenance on software you're not even using, and this is a good time to figure that out. And then try to understand how long it really takes a job to get through production. And for some of you, you know this to this second because you have SLA obligations that are absolutely down to that second, to the point where they get inserted into the mail stream or into the e-delivery streams. But make sure you understand all the time that goes into it on the front end, and understand how many people are touching it to make sure that it gets into it meets the SLA, because you may be surprised. You know, how many change orders are you dealing with, and are those change orders invoiced? You know, as I've mentioned in the past too, you know, I keep running into companies that don't know how much they've missed invoicing. They are not positive that they have invoiced for every job. And they are not positive that they have invoiced for changes that their contract allows them to invoice for. Don't be that company. And then make sure that on a regular basis, you're going back and evaluating what you thought that contract was going to cost you to execute and what you thought your margin was going to be against what it really is. Because in fact, for an awful lot of companies, the reality is they don't know. And they can't even get there. And some of it is because there's fear in production. We're afraid to hire new people because it's going to take time to train them. We're afraid to pay for training because it's going to take people off the production floor. We're afraid to move people around on the production floor because, well, they know that job really well. And if we take them out of that job, oh my God, the world will come to an end. And the reality is that because needs in the market are changing, what customers want to buy is changing, the equipment is changing, the software is changing, you need to be fearless when it comes to evaluating your staff, figuring out who needs what training, getting them that training, and not being afraid to hire people. And when you hire people, especially if you hire someone who has come from another organization that's similar to yours, it's a great idea to sit and talk to that person about how they did their job in their other organization to see if there are things that you can learn, because it can become another step on your evolutionary path. Because your workflow has to evolve. It has to. If it doesn't, you wind up losing margin, you become a commodity. And you, as much as we say the transaction is commodity, in fact, for a lot of you, it's not, because you offer such brilliant services and you want to stay that way. So you want to set up your workflow to ensure that poorly developed inbound files don't clog your network, right? That means pre-flighting and optimizing as early in the process as you possibly can, right? Because you're probably not going to teach your customers to build better files. That's just a reality in our industry. So as fast as it comes in the door, you should be trying to get it as optimized as possible so you're not dragging bloat through the network, onto the archives, onto the servers, onto the DFE. You should be able to minimize the time required to resolve problems just by that one step. Think about all the things that you can free up when things distill faster, when they render faster, when they rip faster, when they get onto the DFE faster, when the press can print faster. And by the way, archive faster and take up less space on the archive, right? Optimizing every step of the workflow is what the goal is here. And this is an automated workflow that pre-flights immediately and optimizes immediately. It's your best friend. The other thing you want to be watching is the data that you capture. And if you say, well, I capture all the data I need, let's think about that. If you're saying capture data, why would I capture data? Let's talk about that too. Dashboards are brilliant tools, but they're only as good as the data that feeds them, and they're only as good as the people who are watching them to understand where the processes are, where the jobs are, what jobs are in trouble, where things need help. You should be looking at a dashboard all the time. You should have dashboards on your production floor. They should also be in the business side of the office. Sales teams should have access to dashboards so that they understand what's going on with the jobs for the clients that they're responsible for without calling the CSR. That's not efficient. That's not evolved. So we want to empower change. We want you to empower change. We want you to go back to your shop, and we want you to start thinking about all the things that you can do to make your workflow really excellent. We want you to automate as much as you possibly can. But before you automate, you're going to have to understand every step in your workflow, what it does, who's doing it, who's responsible for it, how many people understand it, how much time it takes. And then trying to match it to the software you already have to automate as much of it as you can. And then trying to figure out what additional automation steps might help you out. Because the more you can automate, again, the more you mitigate risk and manage your risk. So figure out, are you using software or just paying for it? Right? Because ideally we want to be using it. We want to be using it to optimize the process. Is all the software that's installed used consistently? Don't laugh. I've walked into places where one production manager uses the whole system, and the production manager sitting at the next desk, who's responsible for slightly different product lines, does everything on a spreadsheet. That's not efficient, and that doesn't help the business run efficiently. Make sure you have automated as much as you can, and if you haven't automated it, start to ask why. Because very often the answer to that question is, oh, well, Jack really understands that process and he'd be way better at it than the automation would be. The automation's too constraining. It can't understand us well enough. I promise you, automation, which is always policy-based and always rules-based, can learn everything Jack knows and make better decisions that are not emotional and aren't constrained by other things going on. Automation is dispassionate, and you want it to be. You want to free up Jack to be making decisions on the hard stuff, on the weird stuff, on the stuff that his experience is going to be more valuable for, not on the everyday stuff. In a lot of places, full end-to-end lights out automation, it's not really the goal. But a certain percentage of automation is the goal. So automate everything that you can create a rule for, and you'll be in great shape, and you'll mitigate a lot of risk. Now, this is all going to take some data, and you may discover that you're really not gathering data along the way, and you should be. You should know how long it takes to go through each step of your workflow. You should know how many pages are in your jobs. You should know how much color is involved in those jobs. If you're an inkjet customer printing in full color, you really should be capturing the data about how much ink is used on those jobs. It's true toner too, but I know that inkjet owners are particularly concerned about that. You should be capturing all that data. Shouldn't just capture it though. It ought to be available. It ought to be in a dashboard. It's got to be used to make better decisions about what you charge on the next contract cycle. Because if you don't have that real-time data and you don't go back to your contracting requirements and your estimations and your quotes, then you start losing money year over year because the cost of ink only goes up. And you know that Solomar can help you. It's a great team. It's a great automated solution. You should be watching for all the things that it can do to help you. So what we want to do is avoid regression, right? For those of you who've been here in the past years and listened to me, I'm hoping that you went back to your shops and you tried adding automation, evolving your workflow. The question I ask is, have you been doing self-assessments on a quarterly, heck, I'll take annual, but quarterly basis? Are you looking at your levels of automation? Are you talking to your vendors about how they can help you automate? Are you doing fearless reappraisals of your needs, your hardware and your software needs? Because if you're not going to live happily ever after, and you're not going to evolve, and you need to. And the reason that you need to is because this is all about time and money. Every second you spend on a process is costing you money. Think about having to drop money into a swear jar. That's what we're talking about. So that's the story of Workflow Evolved. Every session that you hear during this user group meeting is designed to help you make great decisions about effectively your workflow. So I hope you'll listen. And of course, if I can help, I'm here to do it, and your Solimar team knows how to find me. Thanks a lot. Again, I'm Pat McGrew, McGrew Group, and this has been Workflow Evolved.